Okay, welcome everyone to our fall quarter dev meetup. We've got a small group of folks here with us today, and this recording is going to be available later on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, hello. We have a couple different things we wanted to chat about in terms of progress in App Inventor this last quarter and some of the stuff that's coming up in the next few months. So the first thing is we did our NB 194 release last month, which included all of the SDK 33 changes. So we hope you're enjoying that and have been able to continue to publish your apps to the Play Store. One of the major things that went into this release is a refactoring of our build server infrastructure, which is a necessary step towards getting our build support for iOS published. And we're really looking forward to being able to share all that with you in the coming months. And then the second major refactor that went into this release was the UI binder work, which allows us to do some updates for the user interface. And Susan, would you like to take a minute to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing that I can talk about is something you can't really see. I mean, you may have seen some slight changes when we rolled out NB 194, and of course, we now have the folder system, which is a long requested feature on the Project Explorer. But most of what you can't see is the framework that we can use to start updating the user interface. And that's major complaint that we usually get in feedback is that our user interface looks 15 years old because it's 15 years old. And but it was not built in a way that was easy for us to change. So we've now moved to a template-based framework called UI Binder underneath the sort of underneath what you see under the hood. And from here, we are hoping to offer multiple user interfaces that can be user selected. And that's partly because if you survey App Inventor users, you tend to get 2 or possibly 3 completely incompatible visions of what our user interface should look like and who our target audience is. So rather than try to come up with a way to address all of those concerns, we're going to try to address them separately. There are some smaller things that are in the works, but we're still kind of excited about that I can show you that will hopefully be going out quite soon. I don't know necessarily that they will be in NB 195, but they will be soon. So if I can share screen. Okay, so yeah, so you can see me. All right, so the first thing I kind of want to show is that we've done a small overhaul of the new project wizard, and it gives you the opportunity to choose the toolkit, which is a feature that you may have noticed on the screen 1 properties. It's been there for quite a while, but it hasn't been terribly user-friendly. And the original vision for this was more focused around templates created by educators. But the idea is that we can restrict the often overwhelming options that exist in App Inventor down to something that a beginner that won't cause just decision paralysis or search problems for beginners. So we can choose here a beginner toolkit. We have a bit of a description here that tells you sort of what the toolkit options mean. And we can also choose theme. And this is also like we have our classic theme, which is intended to be close to homogeneous across Android and iOS platforms, but we have had for years the ability to design to the device. But again, it's not been that easy to find. So now we can ask for these things up front. And and I also have to provide a project name. Sorry about that. Oh, a brilliant one. And here we have started a project. This here is where this is largely for testing purposes. We have a Google Summer of Code project that is finally moving our screen one properties into a project properties dialog all its own, and Toolkit will be there. But for the purposes of this demo, we are selecting it here. And you can see what various toolkit sizes look like. And here we can, select. Oh, okay, we'll forget that. I'm not sure what's going on there. So we can select those. But the other thing that we are in process here, and this is sort of in the last stages of refinement, is that we have added dark mode. And this is currently what it looks like. We're not sure. We're still figuring out some of our colors. Probably the project list header will not stay white, but this is actually an image, which is why you still see it in white. And we are looking at, like, these are not the exact final colors, but we're going to be refining that and looking at the logo. But these are some user interface options that are coming out in the short term.
Diego, you have a question?
Yeah, just one question about the toolkit. Is it possible to hide properties or only components at the moment?
Right now, it is possible, but it's not. But none of the toolkits, the pre-made toolkits, do it. It's still
Okay,
there's still a possibility to create a custom toolkit, and you can associate this in. You can add this to a project. You can put it in a template that can then be downloaded for a specific project. Or you can make the toolkit available to be imported into somebody's App Inventor user interface. But right now, the sort of pre-made beginner, intermediate, expert toolkits don't restrict at that level.
All right.
But they do restrict blocks.
Oh, okay. But is it on a per app setting or a per account setting?
It is a per app setting.
And
go ahead. Sorry.
What happens if, let's say that you are creating the app with an advanced toolkit, you drag an advanced component, and then you change the toolkit to beginner, hiding that component? Like, will it auto show the used component, or will it hide it completely from the palette?
It won't remove it from your design, and you will still be able to interact with it on your design, but you will suddenly not be able to add another one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same logic as the internal drawer, right? So like the phone status component is an internal component, and we can use it when you're editing the companion, but it doesn't typically show. And it's the same logic, right? So it won't show in the palette, but you'll still have the instances that are in the project.
So it's a palette display none setting, basically.
That's exactly what it is. It's entirely a user interface setting. Because again, like, feedback we get from beginners is that there's sort of a terrifying number of components at this point. And even when my daughter at age 8 was trying to do mole mash, the thing I was doing was sitting over her shoulder and helping her find components. So it is a real problem. And so we have been working with the ed team to build some pre-made toolkits that cover, if you have a basic tutorial, you should be able to pick the beginner toolkit and you'll have everything you need. So then you can just very easily, as a exploratory user, self-taught user, you can sort of step up your own experience levels.
Incremental learning.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks, Susan. And I just wanted to build on a couple of things that Susan had brought up. In particular, she mentioned there are some Google Summer Code projects that are helping to improve this whole process as well. Some of the other Google Summer Code projects that we had this past summer included a lot of work by some students to port a lot of the functionality over to iOS, which included a student who worked with Diego to port a lot of the Codular functionality to iOS as well. So we have some big potential improvements coming down the pipeline in terms of the iOS functionality. The other major thing I want to talk about on that front is iOS builds. So this is something that we're hoping to potentially release in the next NB195 release. This is our test server that's available. This particular version is going to be available at the end of this meeting. It's not currently public, but it will be. And the main thing here is this version supports the ability to publish apps to the App Store. So you'll note there's this project properties button here. If I click on that, this is the dialog that Susan was referring to. This was a Google Summer of Code project, which pulls out all of the screen one properties that are really project level properties and puts them into a nice little display. I need to increase my version code to 16 because I've been testing this quite a bit the last couple weeks. And then in particular, there's this iOS settings thing here where you can set the various description settings that you need for App Store approval, which is important. In this particular case, I don't use any of these functionalities, so App Inventor will provide a reasonable default, which basically says that it's not used. Obviously, if you try to get that through the App Store approval process, they probably will ding you for it. So apply appropriate descriptions when it makes sense. So I've set the properties here. The second thing you would need to do when you're building an app is there's this App Store settings where you have to provide an Apple ID tied to your App Store account, and then an app-specific password, which you create through your Apple account that is specific for MIT App Inventor. I've already configured these. The thing is basically write-only because they get encrypted and the server is not able to actually read them back. So you would set these and then hit OK. If you haven't done this the first time you try to build an app for the App Store, it will prompt you for this information. But otherwise, you should be good to go. And then the last thing I need to do is when I come into the build menu, folks who have been testing, you've already seen the ad hoc option. Now there's an upload to the iOS App Store option, and that's going to trigger a build, which will compile my application, bundle it up, and then upload it to the to App Store Connect. So that's kind of going through its machinations now, and the main part of this process actually ends up being the upload. Typically, it's been taking about anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds to do the upload step. And this sends the build directly from the build server at MIT to App Store Connect. So you don't have to actually go through the process of downloading your app and then uploading it anywhere. App Inventor does all the work for you in order to try to streamline this process. And still thinking about it. But this is a nice complement so that if you are interested in potentially building apps with App Inventor for production and publication in the App Store, you now will have the availability to test that. Okay, and then we get this little message that says that's been uploaded to App Store Connect. If I come over here, these are some of my previous builds of Hello Per, and if I refresh, sometimes it takes a couple seconds to show up in the queue here because it gets processed. Let's see if it shows up. Thinking about it. Okay, yeah. So now my build 16, which I just built with App Inventor, is in the processing stage. In a couple minutes it'll become available. But if I come over here, I've already gotten one approved through beta testing with test flight. So if I switch my display, I've got my little Hello Per right on my phone. I don't know if it does the audio, but let's see if it does audio.
Yeah.
Sounded like it did audio. I just had a very loud cat in my ears. Yeah, so this is a copy of Hello Per that I've managed to upload to the App Store and then install onto my iOS device through test. So I haven't tried submitting it for App Store review, but I imagine they'll come back and probably say there are plenty of cat apps in the App Store, and so there's nothing novel here. But the important part is that now you can kind of see the workflow from start to finish of building your app and uploading it to Apple. So we're really excited about that. We're still working out a couple of kinks in the system because occasionally issues crop up. And as I mentioned, this is going to be available on the test server, the iOS test server this afternoon. And then we're hoping that it'll be a part of the next NB195 build coming out in a couple weeks. So pay attention and look forward to that. All right. let's see. Are there any other major things, dev team, that I've missed? I feel like that kind of covers everything we've been working on in terms of the major deliverables in the next couple weeks. Does anybody have any questions for us? Anything that they've been thinking about in terms of functionality that they'd like to see in App Inventor that we could discuss? Any questions about, existing functionality, things we could improve upon? We're happy to take your questions now, and it looks like we have about 10 more minutes to discuss different things. So feel free to fire away.
Hey, Evan, this is Nathan. How are you?
Hello.
Hey, I got your invite a little bit late and our team wasn't able to join, but I just wanted to let you know, we'll follow up and try to schedule something with you for next week. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, great.
Also, if you have something that you think is absolutely horrible about our user interface, I am all ears. I want to collect everybody's hate stories.
It's inevitable.
Well, as I've said before, everyone can agree that maybe it doesn't look good, but nobody can agree on how to make it better.
Nobody can agree what it should be. Yeah, right.
You could open like some kind of collaborative inbox to receive UI feedback.
I'm sorry?
You can open some kind of collaborative inbox to receive UI feedback via email and see how many emails get in.
Possibly, but we've surveyed users for feedback, for years, and we've got 2 or 3 very, very distinct camps. It's just that they aren't compatible. It's there's sort of the group that wants us to be more professional and entrepreneurship focused, and that's kind of in the Codealer area, right? But we also do a lot of work with middle schoolers, and they tend to want us to be more colorful and more fun and more maybe Scratch-like and what? Simpler, exactly. And then we have needs built around some of our sort of like topic-centric forks. We have work that we are doing with Alexa. We have work that we are doing with IoT. Those are separate versions that we're keeping of App Inventor that we want to be able to pull into a single configurable version of App Inventor, and that requires a great deal of user interface underpinnings too.
Yeah, makes sense.
We didn't talk about the Alexa work yet, but maybe we could say a statement on that. We do have an upcoming version of the Alexa interface that is going to add integration with ChatGPT as an option. So we've been exploring that with our contacts at Amazon Future Engineers. And the hope is that the upcoming Hour of AI project, which coincides with Hour of Code in December, will include a module for folks to play around with Alexa and generative AI. So that's something we're also really excited about. The real challenge has been, as many of us have discovered playing with this thing, is that ChatGPT can become very long-winded, and when you feed that through a voice interface, it becomes really burdensome. So it's like I don't need a 5-minute speech on the ethics of cats or something like that. But we're really excited about that too. And we've seen a lot of folks, especially during our Appathon this summer, using the new chatbot and ImageBot components that we added. And so we're really excited to kind of see how people continue to build on all of the generative AI tools we're starting to integrate into App Inventor. We have a question: would App Inventor plan to support native libraries in the coming years? Maybe. I know it's a pull request that we have available. The main thing is it's only useful in extensions, at least when you build the app, because you can't dynamically load libraries that aren't part of the APK, as far as I'm aware. And so it would be possible, but it's basically going to disrupt most people's development process if an extension ends up needing native library. And of course, extensions are not useful for iOS. And certainly a .so library is useless on iOS. So, you know, the main focus has really been recently trying to get iOS parity to the best of our ability. And so stuff that's really Android specific and furthermore only affects a very small percentage of developers, we've kind of not been putting a ton of effort into. You know, we only have 4 developers on the team, core developers on the team, and they're all on this call right now, right? So, so that we, you know, that's to support 3 different operating systems on the browser level, you know, 3 different browsers, 2 different target platforms, actually 3 if you include the Alexa functionality as a separate platform from the Android and the iOS versions. And so that's a lot of work for a very small team, right? And, you know, keeping the service up 24/7 for over 1 million people a month is really important. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly something we can consider, but I would say at the moment, it's still a fairly low priority on our development list.
Now that you mentioned extensions in iOS, are there any plans to support extensions in iOS?
We have some ideas. Certainly, it would not be possible in the companion. Apple's App Store guidelines explicitly state that you're not allowed to use binary code that hasn't been reviewed by the App Store team. There is an exception for educational tools like App Inventor because they do say that all of the code, if you do send code to be executed on the device, has to be user editable, right? So all the blocks that are being sent, you can edit and you can modify, you know, you can move them around and stuff and make your own behavior. So under that policy, you know, there's an exception for tools like App Inventor and others. But you know, most of the people who are building extensions are, you know, building it to use an API that isn't available in App Inventor, right? So, you know, first off, you know, there's probably some dynamic library you'd have to link on the iOS side, you know, that would be non-editable binary, which would violate that policy. So we've tried to avoid that. Some things we have thought about are basically scheme only extensions. So if you could write your entire extension in scheme, then maybe that would be okay. We haven't, you know, tried to force Apple on that one. And of course, you know, the last thing we want is for the companion app to be pulled from the store and negatively impacting everybody. So that's something that we're trying to also be very cognizant of. However, with the advent of the build server functionality, there may be a way, of course, to support eventually having extensions on iOS for the purposes of doing builds. In which case, at build time, we can then add the extra dynamic libraries and sign them and, you know, link them into the executable. But that's going to take us some time to architect. And again, you know, I think when I did an analysis a couple of years ago of App Inventor projects, only about 2% of projects made use of extensions. Right.
2%?
So, yes.
Oh,
So,
I was expecting a way higher number.
Well, if you look at the community, everybody uses extensions, right? But the number of people on the community is a small fraction of the App Inventor user base. Very small fraction, right? I think we had something like 2,000 users in the last month on the community, but we had over 1 million users of App Inventor, right? So you're looking at 0.2% of the people who use App Inventor around the community. So there's a bias when you look at the community of like, well, everyone's doing it this way, but actually the vast majority are not. So that's something to keep in mind. So when we look at the actual numbers, right, 2% of users are using extensions. And then of all of our users, about 20% of them are using Android. So assuming an even distribution there, you know, we can expect maybe 0.4% of all of our users would need iOS extension support. So that is something that obviously, you know, we look at it and say, you know, is it, you know, how much effort is it going to take versus what the payoff is going to be? A lot of this is always coming down to, you know, those kind of cost benefit trade-offs. So However, if somebody wants to take that on as a potential project in the open source community, right? One of the reasons we're trying to do these events is to try to get more people contributing to open source. And if we can architect something that actually works well, then that's certainly something we can consider taking into the system. Just keeping in mind that everything we merge, we also have to maintain going forward too. So,
but no research
it's not for free.
Yeah, like no research has been done so far into extensions in iOS, right? It's just the idea.
No, and it's unfortunate too, because we did have excuse me, a Google Summer of Code proposal to do the scheme-based extensions, or at least explore what that would look like. Unfortunately, we didn't get as many slots as we have in the past, and because of that, we ended up with one less project than we had hoped to have. So, had things gone a different way, we might have had some basic extension work for iOS ready to go, but we don't.
This is, I think, the first time since I have administrated our Summer of Code project where we really had to turn away a really promising project, and that hurts. But in the past, sometimes we have had more slots than we had really viable projects. But this was a much more painful culling process this past summer.
Makes sense.
All right, so we're at time. So folks, if you want to hang on, you can hang on for a little while longer, but otherwise, I'll bid you all farewell, and we will see you probably early December with our next quarterly meeting. So, thanks, everyone.